Hey guys, I'm Yusra. I run our social media at NOCD, and I thought it would be kind of fun and insightful to share my OCD diagnosis story with all of you. I feel like there's still so much stigma around actually getting diagnosed with a condition. And I totally get that because moment of realness and vulnerability, I had an eating disorder for many years. And I knew I had one, but it didn't hit me or bother me until my doctor literally wrote in my files, eating disorder. I was like, that is rude. Do not write that. I don't want the world to know. I mean, not that the world would know, but I didn't want it to be official, right? So receiving anything official related to your health and well-being can be so scary. Um, with OCD, I kind of had an inkling that maybe something was going on. I didn't really know it was OCD at all because at this point, at 25, I still thought OCD was mainly cleaning compulsions or being super neat or always having to shower multiple times a day, right? It was base stereotype information. But my best friend actually is a licensed therapist, and she has known me since like 6th grade. So she's known me for most of my life actually. And one day she texted me. We were going back and forth about something. I think I was asking her if she was mad at me, randomly. That's a thing that I always would do. That's a thing that I would always do, is ask my friends or loved ones if they're mad at me for no reason. If I saw something slightly off in texting tone, if there was one less emoji than I thought there should be, if I feel like she didn't respond fast enough, I would instantly, genuinely believe that the person was mad at me. And my compulsion, which I didn't realize was a compulsion at the time, was to ask them and to make sure that they weren't mad at me, or if they were, figure out what I could do to solve the issue. So I think it was a moment of me asking her, oh my God, are you mad at me? I'm so sorry if I ever did anything. That's another thing that I would always do, is over apologize. Honestly, that's still something that I'm working on right now. But in my head, I would rather apologize for something, even though I didn't necessarily think I did anything wrong, than have someone feel poorly or negatively towards me. So at that point, my friend was like, you know what? I think you have OCD. What? You're going to diagnose me with a condition? Obviously, she was not actually diagnosing me. But she was just like, I think you might have OCD. And I was like, what do you mean? Also rude, because again, that whole thing of having someone else tell you what you have, it feels a little scary and jarring. And I was like, I don't have obsessions with cleaning. I am a messy person, honestly. I don't think I have OCD. And she's like, no, a lot of OCD can actually be really mental. And I was like, okay, maybe it's just my anxiety. I have really bad anxiety, and I do have really bad anxiety. And she's like, no, I don't know. Maybe look into it. And I was like, okay. I was kind of annoyed, honestly. Not at her, but at the concept of possibly having something else wrong with me. And I started researching OCD and learning about how so many compulsions can actually be completely mental, not physical, because I don't personally have any physical compulsions. So I learned that rumination is a huge part of OCD, and right off the bat, I was like, oh my God, I do that all the time. I cannot stop overthinking for the life of me. If something is stuck in my head, it will take over my entire day, and I will not be able to get out of bed until I've either solved that thought or distracted myself with something completely different that then takes over my mind again. I started reading more about that, and then I started reading about over apologizing or texting too much, looking for reassurance. Reassurance was a huge thing for me. And I didn't know that these things could be OCD. I genuinely thought it was just my anxiety. And anxiety was a lot easier for me to accept, honestly, because I feel like in today's day and age, anxiety is less taboo. It's more accepted and more openly talked about than other mental health conditions. So I was fine being an anxious girly. I was like, bring it on. But being an OCD girly kind of freaked me out a lot, honestly. Um, I was on Reddit pages, I was looking it up until finally I brought it up to my social worker. And the reason I was talking to my social worker was because I had this really big surge in anxiety after a big life change. And I thought it was anxiety, but turned out it was really an OCD flare up. However, I explained to her my like thought patterns and like how I could not move on from something until I either solved it or something else came up, and how it would take over my entire day. Like if I had a certain thought in my head, or if I felt like I did something wrong and somebody didn't like me, I genuinely would be stuck in bed. I've called off work for instances like that. I wouldn't eat. I had no appetite, things like that. Also, I would worry so much about other people and feel like their outcomes or events in their life were my fault. So all of these things were going on. I just chalked it up to being anxiety. I told my social workers like, hey, I don't know like how true this is, but my best friend who is a therapist said that I might have OCD, and I was wondering if I could get tested for that. And she was like, okay, yeah. So the social worker works with a psychiatrist and stuff, and I think they did the Y box with me, and they asked me all the questions about how I feel and my symptoms and stuff. And she was going to go over it with the psychiatrist, so she didn't give me an answer right away. But then later she did give me an answer on the phone and was like, yeah, honestly, like you do have big signs of OCD. We think you do have OCD. And I was like, and in that moment, instead of being as afraid as I thought I would be, it was a big relief because it made me feel like I wasn't crazy. It made me feel like there was an answer to why I've been acting the way I have been, and that there was a way to get better. And that's the biggest thing, because when I was chalking everything up to anxiety, it just felt like I was so stuck. Like, what else can I do besides therapy and take my medication? It's not helping with these thought cycles, with these loops, with these fears of mine. So knowing that I actually had OCD and knowing that there is a specific therapy for it that's different from normal therapy was just extremely helpful and eye-opening. That allowed me to look at different resources. Honestly, I looked through NOCD's community too before I even worked here, because it's just so real and raw, and being able to see other people think in the same method that I do with OCD just made me feel so much less alone. Also made me so thankful for my best friend taking that step and saying, hey, maybe you should get this checked out, because I'm sure it wasn't easy for her. And now, like, look at me, I'm working here at OCD. Not to like toot my own horn, but it's so fulfilling to work with people that are helping others get treatment for their OCD, but also just be more aware of it and spreading that education and knowledge to people whether they have it or not. One thing that I just like love now that like I know I have OCD, and I know what I'm dealing with, is when I told my best friend, I was like, girl, you were right, I do have it. And she was like, I knew it. And it's so funny because I didn't know it at all, but she had that inkling for a long time, she told me. And it's funny because now sometimes I'll still have those same compulsions of asking her, are you mad at me? Or like thinking I offended her, then over explaining myself and asking her if she understands, or like if she's okay, or if I did anything to offend her. And she will literally say, I am not answering that because I care about you, and I think this is one of your compulsions. And that sounds so scary and like weird, but it's so helpful. And I just feel I just feel so happy that I have someone in my life that is able to truly understand what I'm going through, but also helps me get the help and answers that I deserved. And yeah, still to this day, sometimes she literally tells me she's not going to answer my question or not going to interact or interject in my overthinking spirals, because she knows that it's something that is just going to give me reassurance and I need to work on. I think that for me, my OCD diagnosis was a moment of clarity, I initially approached it with fear, and dread and disdain. I didn't want another disorder. Like, I already had anxiety, I already have depression, I already had an eating disorder. I didn't want another thing to add to my long list of things that are wrong with me. But honestly, that OCD diagnosis was able to change my life. I'm not just saying that, it genuinely helps me realize there's a way that my brain works in the thought patterns that it does. There's a reason that I cannot physically move when I am thinking about something. There's a reason I'm so afraid of something bad happening to my family, or that I blame myself for so many things that are out of my control. I think that it's important to know that OCD can look different for everybody, but it's still OCD at the end of the day. And you still deserve the same compassion and help and like love that you would give to people around you if they were dealing with it. I think that a diagnosis is a path towards an answer, and it's a path towards a plan. And that's how I like to view it now, especially because before I was diagnosed, I had no plan. I had no idea what was going on. Me talking to the social worker, just like typical talk therapy, was not helping my OCD. And I didn't know it was actually hurting me. But getting that diagnosis, doing my research, being able to connect with the community really showed me that we are not alone. OCD is actually one of the most common mental health conditions, and I didn't know that. I'm sure a lot of you don't know that either, but it is. Once I got diagnosed, right, I told my best friend right away, and she was happy in the sense that she was happy that I could finally put a name to this thing and get the help that I actually needed for my OCD. I was relieved also because I didn't feel as crazy anymore. I was a little nervous about having another like condition added to my like list of things I'm going through. But since this was such a different disorder in the way that it worked, I felt kind of relieved that I knew I wasn't just crazy. And one of my biggest fears is being crazy, or being called crazy, or people thinking I'm crazy. So this for me really helped me realize that no, you're not crazy. You're actually going through something that is very real, but also something that is very manageable if you do the right kinds of therapies and treatments. Um, I was nervous to tell my parents because there is a lot of stigma around OCD, even especially in older generations, right? Like, I was able to tell my best friend easily, my sister easily, they like got it. My parents was a little scary, but the way I approached it was just like being honest with them. I was like, I have my like therapy sessions, and I took this test for OCD and I think I have it. And at first they were just kind of like, oh, okay. But what's very interesting is now, um, having that initial conversation opened the door for so many other conversations of OCD thought patterns that my parents even feel like they have, and just reducing that stigma around the condition and being able to talk about it openly. And also, I think that opened up to my family being able to talk about mental health more. So I'm not saying I'm like glad that I have OCD, but I'm glad that my diagnosis was able to bring me so much clarity, but also able to help me talk about things more openly with my family and really just reduce the stigma overall.